All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Superfund case study in successful community engagement. We have got a great lineup of speakers today.
Hi, thank you, Brenda. My name's Josh Barber. I am the EPA Region 3 Superfund project manager for the Lower Darby Creek Area Superfund site. And I've been the project manager since 2009. So what we're going to do today is we have a panel of community members, technical experts, and a few EPA folks such as myself. And we're going to talk a little bit about our experience with the Lower Darby Creek Area Superfund site, specifically the Clearview landfill that is located in the Eastwick neighborhood of Southwest Philadelphia. And really very brief background about Clearview before I let everybody else introduce themselves is it's a site that was listed on the MPL in 2001, but it has a long history that precedes it. And what we want to talk about today is what it was like for the Eastwick residents who have lived there for various periods of time, going back decades in many instances, to live next to the landfill, what it was like to work with EPA, what it was like before EPA got its acting gear, speaking specifically from my own personal experience. And we'll talk about a community community advisory group that was formed. We aren't going to go into the details of how to form a community advisory group overall, because there's a lot of unique facets that happen when you form a community advisory group for Superfund. And every site and community and CAG is unique. But what we want to cover here is what it was like for us and for this site, and cover some of the most poignant and important moments that that happened in this community's history. So right now, what I want is all the other community members and the other technical experts who have worked with us to introduce themselves briefly, just to say, you know, where they live or whom they represent or how they've been involved. And then we will have a short little video clip that will be hopefully insightful to provide some context for what this community was like prior to the site getting to where it is now. I'll turn it over to the Eastwick community residents. If Brenda, if you would like to go first.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I am Brenda Whitfield. I am a part of the Eastwick Lower Darby Creek Area Community Advisory Group. Have been on the group since the beginning, and been an active member in the community.
Marion Sanders, resident.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, resident of Eastwick since 1975 and a member of the CAG along with Brenda since the inception.
All right, Eileen.
Hi, I'm Eileen San Pedro. I'm a resident in Eastwick, on the CAG team and part of the technical working group as a co-chair.
Marilyn.
Hi, I'm Dr. Marilyn Howarth. I'm an occupational environmental medicine physician. I'm from the University of Pennsylvania's Center of Excellence in Environmental Toxicology, which is part of the medical school there. And I was have been the medical and health advisor from the beginning of the CAG.
All right, Derron.
Hi, I'm excuse me. I'm Derron LaBrake. I'm an invited member of the CAG. I serve the community as a technical expert, and mostly in that capacity, I'm reviewing EPA's work and translating that into understandable language for the community, because it's complex science. And my day job, when I'm not volunteering doing this work, I'm a consulting ecologist.
And Angie.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Ithier. I am the Community Involvement Coordinator for the Lower Darby Creek Area Superfund site, and I sort of liaise between the community members and our regional office. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So we all work together. We've been together for a long time, and everything's very lovey-dovey with us. We have a great rapport, but it's not always been this way, and that's the purpose of what we want to discuss next with some of the questions. But I have there was a documentary made independently about Eastwick right around the time of when the site was being proposed to the NPL in 2000. And there was a major flood caused by Hurricane Floyd in 1999, and there had obviously been some community concerns about the landfill and flooding and other concerns before that. But that was really an apex point, a turning point with community frustration. So to set the scene for where the site came from in the early 2000s, we have a short snippet from this this documentary, and this documentary is available on YouTube, and we'll put the links in the chat. And then we'll get into the questions that will help walk us through the history and how we kind of got to where we are now. Just bear with me as I share my screen and I'll become muted.
But that's okay, because we're getting ready to set up a voter registration table out here. So for all of those folks who are not going to come and see about us, we're going to go see them in September.
All right.
As more information comes out, as we find out more information, we know and we understand that we are being exposed on a daily basis to the most toxic of waste material. Those materials include PCBs, arsenic, cadmium, magnesium.
If you live anywhere in this neighborhood, you could be affected with the particles by methane gas that might be connected to the PCBs. So you can breathe it in. And it is a cancer-causing agent. There are many cancer-causing agents. Actually, the most lethal that we're concerned about are the PCBs and the benzene. Recently, the EPA released information that indicated there was even dioxin in our site. This has been a problem for the last 16 years. This dump site they have been dumping since the early 40s. So what do we have, 60 years of dumping? We have essentially a witch's brew of toxic substances that are affecting our lives. We have an issue of immediate illnesses like respiratory, bronchitis. Some of the children have been affected by bone infections. All this information is very, very simple. It's not complicated. Did you wonder about your health after the flood, whether you had a sore throat, bronchitis, skin infections? You wonder about it and you're going to your doctor and you haven't got a reason? Yeah, this is interesting.
Can you hear me now? Am I?
Yes.
All right. And my screen shouldn't be sharing ever. So that was just a little example of, I would encourage everybody to check out the video to see what the feeling was with this site back when we were just approaching the listing of it in 2000 and 2001. So now to get to some of the different questions for the panel members, this one is going to be for hopefully Marion Sanders and Brenda Whitfield. We'll start with Marion. So what was it like way back before EPA was involved, during when the landfill was operating, with people moving into the neighborhood? It was after the nation's largest urban renewal project had moved a lot of people out and then rebuilt the neighborhood and brought folks back in the 70s and in the 80s.
We would come out in the mornings preparing to go to work and find residue of burned materials on our automobiles, constant odors in the area, unexplained. And we could not get any kind of positive response from officials, both local and federal, as to what was going on. When we purchased these homes, we were under the impression that it was a safe environment, redeveloped, but that was quickly nullified. And it wasn't until Hurricane Floyd in '99 when all of us were affected by the waters that came into our homes and the various colorations or whatever of the toxins that really stirred the community up.
It was a time that it was chaos and we were in dissension in the neighborhood. The politicians weren't answering our calls. We felt like the politicians had turned their back on us. Our children were having illnesses. They were exposed to the air because my grandchildren was playing on the hill in the back of my house. And there was no answers. And we was constantly questioning the politicians as to what is going on that you will not even answer our calls, that you're not concerned about Eastwick out here. And you saw the video of the marches that we took a part of to get their attention. There was phone calls made to the politicians. There was practically begging and pleading to get help. There was letters being sent out to the politicians and to people that were over us that we voted for. You heard in the video where we cried out, if you're not going to help us, then it was shown in our voting in the fall of that year. And finally, with all of the different reactions and the things that was going on in our neighborhood, they heard our cry and they answered our plea by going to the organization they called the EPA.
Thank you both. One other member of the community who wasn't on initially when we did introductions is Margie Cobb, Margaret Cobb, who's on now. Hi, Margie. Wait, but you're muted.
Muted.
Hi, how are you? Sorry, I'm
There
late.
we go. That's okay. So how would you say that the community got EPA's attention at this point in the neighborhood's history?
It was that consistency that we had in continuing to carry on whatever avenue that there was to open a door to get attention to our plight. We used it. And I have to give homage to Leo Brundage. He refused to give up. And because he wouldn't, he kept us all involved.
And can you speak about who Leo Brundage was?
Oh, yes. Leo Brundage is a neighbor. He's my neighbor on Saturn Place. And he was really one of the, we consider, founder of the CAG, because he wanted us to be a part. He wanted something to be done. And we followed right along with him.
Thank you. Brenda, did you have anything else you wanted to add about how you were getting EPA's attention?
There was, we started going to our neighbors. We started talking to the community. We started talking and we came together as a community to make sure that the politicians understood our dilemma out here in Eastwick. We was constantly in communication with each other and with Leo and some of our trailblazers that are no longer with us anymore. They found a way to get the city people, city council, all of them, and they finally got a listening ear to what the community was saying out in Eastwick. So that was the main thing that I just wanted to say. A lot of our activists, our trailblazers, they are no longer here anymore. But it was through their hard work that got this project started. They refused to stop paying attention to our neighborhood. They refused to have us on the back burner. They refused to take no for an answer. And they were, Leo Brundage was in City Hall every other day. When he came back from Dunkin' Donuts with his cup of coffee, the next thing was, y'all come out here and let me tell you what happened today. Leo Brundage was, no, you're not going to do this to our community. And I thank God for him and Tyrone Beverly and Alice Geiger, who were a part of the CAG, but are no longer here with us.
That's, yeah, and I thank you both for going, like, recounting some of that. I think we can keep going with that, but I want to move on to the next question, which is a question that'll include me, but also from Marion and from Brenda. So speaking of how now we had the site, Lower Darby Creek Area Superfund site was made an official Superfund site in 2001. The question we have is as we were moving along and we selected the cleanup plan in 2014, how is it, the question that we're going to discuss now is, how did the Eastwick community and EPA both end up recommending or wanting a community advisory group? And I'll just touch briefly on what my experience was and then turn it over to Marion and Brenda. What you can see in my experience was, I had been a project manager for several years. I had started in 2006 as an RPM. But as Brenda mentioned, and Margie, Leo was regularly contacting me as the project manager. Hey, Marion.
Hello.
And I would get emails or letters from him or copies of his letters going to elected officials. There were some other quasi community organizations that were made up of different neighbors. And at that point, I was more reactive than proactive in trying to initially respond to any of the questions and concerns while we're still trying to investigate the site. And I met with Leo and some other folks one time at a McDonald's or the Dunkin' Donuts, I can't remember which, but it wasn't very effective, and I could feel that. And I had worked on a few other sites that already had community advisory groups or other kind of advisory panels. And I was feeling pulled in so many different directions and not really knowing who was speaking for whom, because I would hear different things, but they were all things that were valid. So I was hoping that I could find a way to pull together a group of representatives within the community who could act as a sounding board for me and for EPA for not only what we were planning, but also how to convey that which we knew and try to get a sense of where were we missing the mark, because it felt like for every community event that we had, it felt like we were missing the mark for every meeting that I held for several years. And that's kind of when we had the thought, at least on our end, that a CAG would be a good way to go. Marion, what's your recollection?
Once again, Leo was the conduit to getting a lot of us involved because he was having meetings and interacting with people. I remember him vividly talking to me about Dr. Howarth, that we had gotten Penn involved with our plight, and that we needed to get some of the other, there were several community groups around here to get people involved in setting up the CAG. And it would help us to have some input and understanding more about how they were going to clean up that site over there. We had meetings monthly in the cold and the rain and the heat, whatever. Thankfully, in some ways, COVID brought us to Zoom meetings, which made it easier. And of course, at the beginning of the CAG, there were so many different personalities, individuals who were not directly affected by the conditions from the site who wanted to have more say-so over us. So there was some friction in the beginning. And also, once we started with the meetings, the technical information was over our heads. So there was frustration there because we couldn't understand some of what was going on. After all, we were not scientists. And but all the kinks were worked out. Thankfully, EPA put a moderator, coordinator, Marion Cox, in to kind of get us all settled down to get on the same page.
Brenda, what do you think? What's your recollection of why the CAG? How did it come about?
Because in the community, we had a lot of dissension and discord. It was confusion. No one was able to sit down at the table to talk about the issues in the community dealing with contamination. And it was just a lot of arguing. So we had to have a facilitator. That person became Marion Cox, who brought us together as a community to say, we're going to need someone to express what the community is feeling without having everybody speaking and nobody listening. So we needed an organization to come about that will be able to communicate, get the work done in the community, but yet and still be able to talk to the community on layman's terms. So Mary said the best way to do is to have an organization within the community that will be able to communicate to EPA, vice versa, EPA be able to come to the community and tell them what their findings was with the contamination. Because the way it was going, we was fussing and cussing at each other and we were getting nowhere. So we needed an organization between the two just to settle us at the table. So the CAG was brought about.
And you both do a really great job of like expressing better, you know, kind of just the feeling and the tone and what was being said. This was happening back in like 2015, 2016,
Right.
you know, and I was going back and looking at the emails today, you know, and it was just like planning meeting after planning meeting after planning meeting. And there were all these issues that deal with not only the landfill, but flooding is a huge issue in Eastwick as well. And EPA can't directly deal with flooding mitigation per se, but it was kind of wrapped up in the landfill itself because when floods occurred, parts of the landfill would be flooded as well. So it was kind of an inextricably linked thing. But you both mentioned Marion Cox, who was the neutral facilitator that EPA brought in to help with the CAG formation process. She was, I think we all will, you know, she had her fingerprints are all over this site and this community and this CAG because of what she did and how she did it and how she convinced us all that it was all our great idea to do it. But can you, I think for a few of us, we're going to talk about what the neutral facilitator's role was in the formation of the CAG. Margie, would you go first, please?
Sure. When Marion came on board, just like everyone is saying, especially you, Josh, she listened to all of us and then was able to allow us to communicate with each other. And her fingerprints is all over everything. She helped us to get an operational manual together. And what is so ironic now to remember that she had a list of items that was tucked up on the board when we came into meetings on how we were to treat each other. You know, no hollering, let everybody finish their comment. It was amazing, but it worked. And also, I think what's great is that we had no resources to pay for Marion, but the EPA covered her cost and it was well worth every penny.
I agree. Marilyn, would you go ahead, please?
Yes, I mentioned earlier, I'm a physician and I'm the medical and health technical advisor to the CAG. So I don't live in the community, but I was there through the entire process, listening and feeling the frustration in the community. And I will say that in my view, one of the most important things that the neutral facilitator did was to set a tone of mutual respect. She clarified that everyone in that room had an equal say in those proceedings. And although there were some people who had more of a lived experience and other people had more of a technical background, it didn't matter because we were all going to listen to each other because the end product needed to be formed through mutual respect. And I love the way she did it. She did a great job. And I think that the success of our CAG largely sort of was due to that initial setting of respect for all that we then the rest of us carried through, I think, for the rest of the time. And I think it really mattered. As the medical and health advisor, I applied a health lens to every step. There, you heard already, there were health concerns when this site was first being listed. The community raised those health concerns well before it was listed. They were worried about asthma, they were worried about cancer, and a whole host of other things. And I tried to push the EPA to include a health lens and ask the right questions in some cases that allowed for a health lens to be applied to all of the work. And we, as part of our health and safety committee, we reviewed documents and procedures that the EPA produced. They produced health and safety plans, a community engagement plan and process. And our community group working on health and safety reviewed all of that and gave input. And it allowed for the community members, I think, to have a longer time to deliberate and talk together about these issues and think them through. Most recently, we worked on a flyer that looked at fish consumption and the risks around fish consumption. And all throughout the process, there was a role for health and safety and also to improve risk communication. Now, our CAG happened to have Josh, who was a really good communicator. But in my experience with other EPA sites, I can say that is not 100% the case. That's not always what we get. And it's okay because people do have different skill sets. So in a CAG, I think it is helpful to have, in some cases, a medical professional or health professional who has risk communication skills. I think that's very useful. I wanted to also lift up something that both Brenda and Marion said, and that was that there were different voices. And I think one of the mistakes that sometimes an EPA project manager may make is thinking that the word community refers to just one group or one way of thinking. And that is almost never the case. Community members frequently have slightly different agendas. In our case, we had folks who lived immediately adjacent to the landfill, and their concerns were very different than those who lived maybe a quarter mile away, who were just worried about the trucks going in front of their house. So there were lots of different, and all of these agendas are legit, but they are not all the same. And I think a successful CAG recognizes and allows all of those voices to be heard. I just will say that I have that's something I'm going to put in the chat. It is a video training program that I've created with several other National Institute of Environmental Health Science centers in the US. It's around how to engage respectfully with the industry, with the EPA, and with the community, a training session really for all three, so that they can actually make relationships that are trusting and end up sort of the way we have, which is that we feel fairly positive about the outcome. I'll put that in the chat and I'll stop talking now.
Thank you, Marilyn. Derron, would you go ahead and speak about your experiences with Marilyn and the formation of the CAG overall and how that came about?
It was, excuse me, it was a very worthy exercise. It brought the community together and gave a really good avenue for dialogue between EPA and the community. And so everybody comes to all of these types of organizations with an agenda. And I can say my agenda was, I live in the upper part of the watershed, so this doesn't directly affect me, but it affects my the place I live. So I wanted to offer my services to the community to help them to be aware of what EPA was doing and what EPA was proposing to do. And for the majority of my career, I worked for PRP groups that EPA was forcing to do things that they reluctantly agreed to do. And I just wanted to make sure that I was watching EPA's activity, make sure that they were holding PRP groups too, to make sure that the community was getting the best solution for this particular site. And it got exhausting because we were, the proposed design came out and we had meeting after meeting after meeting, and we were really hand in hand with EPA as that design was being worked on and executed. And I wanted to make sure that my presence at the meetings was to help residents who didn't completely understand the technical scientific jargon and concepts that were being put forth by EPA to address this contamination. So if anybody had any questions, I always made sure that they voiced them during our technical group meetings and that we got a full understanding so that no one walked away feeling like, oh, I just heard a whole bunch of technical stuff. I have no idea whether they're doing the right thing or not.
Thank you. Eileen, if you are there, but your camera was turned off. Hello. Eileen, could you give your perspective? That's okay. Your perspective on the role of the neutral facilitator and the CAG overall in the formation.
I think the formation of the CAG was great. You had different residents and partners from the government and city at the table. And I've had experiences with projects in the past, and I understand, like, when you do a project, getting the specs or getting the concerns of the community or the end user, if you bring that and you incorporate that into the design, it's usually a better project. So to see that and be a part of that was really nice. Marion and Derron were key players and experts, definitely, to help our community. They brought their expertise to the table. So when we were reviewing the design docs, we can go to them for questions, or they would also pose questions on our behalf, which was nice. And sorry here, it was just like, I think together when the CAG was formed, the end output was like successful relationship building, and then it helped the project. So we were part of like being like feasibility study outputs, and then prior to the design, we had a chance, the whole CAG had a chance to see what the design would entail, and then we had a chance to put our 2 cents in. So from a community standpoint, it was nice. Usually projects are implemented without community input, and then that's it. We just, you get the complaints after. So this time we got to put our 2 cents in.
I don't say it was more than 2 cents. I'm just before we move on to our last question, and then any other questions from the folks that are watching this panel or participating in this panel, just to give everybody a sense, the CAG formation for this site, the community advisory group formation process, took about a year from when we initially, Marion came in and she did a communications assessment, which was really critical for EPA to understand just what were all the actual concerns that were out there. And then in the end, we ended up with a CAG that was like a main body, but then there was a technical working group that Derron and Eileen co-chaired. And the whole, I think Marion's goal was that there was community representation obviously in every facet of the CAG. There was another group, which is the Community Health and Safety Working Group, that was co-chaired by Marilyn and the late Cherie Driver as well. So we, at one point, after we finished the formation process, we were having the subcommittees would meet for those people who were interested in those things, because not everybody was interested in technical versus community health and safety. There would be report outs at the main CAG meeting, but we were having 3 to 4 meetings per month for the better part, I gotta say, I think it was up to 2 years, just as we were really in the heat of kind of forming all of these plans for the cleanup and the design. And then we started with the residential yard excavations and moving on from there. So there was a lot, and there was this whole infrastructure and this framework put together with the leadership of the neutral facilitator, but based upon the input that she got from all of the stakeholders that were involved, not only people who are here, but the other community members. I think it was 18 or 20 community representatives in addition to all the technical people as well. And there's a few other people I'm sure that I'm forgetting. So it was a lot. It was a monstrous effort that really, the 2 cents that we get from everybody really made the return on investment was, I think it's hard to put a value on that. So moving forward, kind of after thinking about how the CAG, the Community Advisory Group, was formed, turning it back on the members from the community who are here now, do you think that this CAG has worked? What's your reflection on this? I will start with Marion.
You're muted.
Trying to find the mute. Is it on the bottom left of your screen?
Are we there
There
now?
we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There has always been tension once we had that first flood in '99, that every time there was a report of possible flooding, even to the point where the mayor had us evacuate to go to other locations and what have you. There were several people that I knew of, neighbors, who were suffering from PTSD because of all the strain that was going along. And even though the purpose was not to have, so to speak, direct import on the flooding situation, what the EPA did around there has thankfully alleviated us from getting any floodwaters over these last 4 to 5 years. And working on that creek and building up the borders, and it's beautiful back there as well. We just had a ceremony congratulatory to all of us and for those persons who did all the work on the 4th of May to see the transition that has taken place back there. Not only is it a thing of beauty, but it also gives us a feeling of security, hopefully, until they get the levee or the barriers in to control the water. But we're feeling much better about it. Absolutely. And we've
Brenda.
gotten to know our
Oh,
neighbors
sorry. Go ahead,
better too.
Marion.
No, I was just going to say, and I've gotten to know some of the neighbors, as they say, from the planted streets back there that I did not know before, and have formed relationships which are sustaining, and we're still here.
I'm going to make this really quick because time is just flying. the most important responsibility that the CAG had was to assist in the movement of information from the community to EPA. That was the most important thing, getting the information and having the CAG. We were able to understand the websites that the EPA was able to put together for the good of the community, the residents, the websites that were put together by EPA, and the fact that the CAG was there to direct the residents to these websites was very instrumental in letting the community know what was going on with the EPA. The leadership of the CAG also brought about monitoring the work of the EPA groups and the experts, and making sure that the information came back to the community in a decent and healthy way, on layman's term, as Derek would say. So the communication was there by having an organization like the CAG.
Sorry, I was trying to see if somebody else wanted to speak. Margie, would you go ahead?
Oh, yes, the CAG has been good to us, and we are really pleased with the results of us working with the EPA. I want to again reemphasize that we've been working with you guys since 2015. It's amazing, and we still are talking to one another. So that goes to show you that it does work.
Agreed. Eileen, do you have any thoughts on how the CAG worked?
I'm just going to piggyback on what everybody said. I thought it was definitely successful to have the right partners, residents, city officials, government officials at the same table throughout the project prior to design, so you can get your input in during the design. You guys even brought in experts. You flew them into our area to answer any questions that were maybe over some of our heads, to explain some more of how the landfill cap would work, how the stabilizations of the banks were put in, like some pieces that were very technical and scientific. You brought the right people in to explain some of those pieces of the project. So that was very successful. And then the relationships that we're all still speaking together now and understand how this works. So that was definitely a great aspect.
Thank you. I know you weren't planning to offer that, but I appreciate that you could. We have a few minutes left for questions, but Marilyn or Derron, did you have any other final thoughts on the CAG and how it worked?
I have one thing that I'll add. Its success, or the success of the CAG in this project, shows in the product that's out there in everyone's backyard. No one, like this is a community that would absolutely let you know if they didn't like something. And I didn't see any signs that said, we don't like that you did this, we don't like that you did that. It has achieved its goal, the EPA's goal and the community's goal. Really positive improvement for the.
Thank you all for offering your thoughts. Angie or Sasha, do we have questions in the chat that
Yes.
we as the panel could answer?
So one that I thought was interesting was, and Josh or anyone, feel free to speak to, how did you find Marion, the neutral facilitator?
By divine intervention, I guess, is one way you could answer that question. There is within EPA, Superfund. My answer is very brief. Superfund requires community engagement like few other government regulations do, federal government regulations. And so Superfund has a lot of resources, but EPA overall has this Conflict Prevention and Resolution Center, the CPRC. And we went to them because they have a group of pre-approved on-contract neutral facilitators that we can tap into, both for Superfund and outside of Superfund, to help with any kind of issues, not just mediation, but a lot of different things.
Thanks, Josh. There's a question about how can environmental justice or air quality standards get monitored to show harm? And does the community meet with the Department of Environmental Quality for the concerns? And also, is there an EJ group that now speaks or advocates for the community?
That's a lot of questions all at once. Brenda, I see you nodding your head. Do you want to answer?
And we just have
Yes, I do. We have several organizations that the city has put together. One of them is the Office of Sustainability. We have Office of OEM, Office of Emergency. And we have also the politicians have come together and the city people have come together. But the most one that is great is the Office of Sustainability, which works with the city and the residents out here. So it's a great organization, and it's bringing us together.
And besides the CAG, there's several other community-based Eastwick organizations too, right?
Yes.
I lose track of all of them.
We have, especially ours, Eastwick United, CDC, which works with the community for flood recovery, resilience, those people that was affected with flooding and with the contamination. It brought about that organization so that we're able to get grants to help the residents in the community to help build their homes back up, to make it be safe and all. So we have Eastwood Friends and Neighbors that for the beautification of the community out here. And there is GOBS. It brought about different organizations for the good of the community that is helping the community. The best thing that happened with the Superfund site is the fact that it put us on the map, and we're getting attention and help from politicians and people that never thought about us.
Well said. Angie, do we have time for any more?
We are at our end point. I just wanted to address, there were two questions just asking about the definitions of CAG and PRP. So I did put that in the group. A CAG is a community advisory group, and a PRP is a potentially responsible party. So I did drop that in the chat, but wanted to just address it because in true government fashion, we just went with our acronyms.
Sorry. Well, so if we're at time, then I just want to say thank you to everybody on the panel. And thank you for all the time that we've spent together. And also thank you to everybody who was listening in and presenting questions. There is, in this day and age, there's websites out there for everything. So the CAG, the ELDCA CAG has a website. The links from Marilyn's work is in the chat as well. And there are lots of information out there about Lower Darby Creek and the work that we've done there and the work that's upcoming. There's a lot more to go. We're only a few steps of the way there. So thank you all for your time, and I will turn it over to our IT leaders, IT support team to help us out.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending this session, and thank you all to all the speakers. That was a wonderful discussion. Please complete the survey if you are not attending any more sessions, or just help give us feedback about your experience with the R3 Summit. There are additional sessions happening at 2 p.m. And we hope to see you for the rest of the day. Thank you.